It is to be recalled that the United States and other 5 countries released a joint statement on Wednesday, 12th of October 2022, to express their concern on the resumption of hostilities in Ethiopia. The joint statement called upon the Eritrean forces to stop their military operations and to immediately withdraw from Ethiopia. We have asked an expert of international relations and comparative politics, Dr. Molla Redda, for his insight on Eritrea's involvement in the war in Tigray. The expert says withdrawal of the Eritrean forces is essential to find a peaceful way out to the current crisis.
I don't think it can solve all of the crises that we're facing in the moment, but it would definitely go a long way towards finding a peaceful way out of the current crisis. Because the Eritrean army is knee-deep in Tigray at the moment. It is brutalizing our people. In fact, the Eritrean army is deliberately targeting, for example, the Kunama community in Tigray. And so by eliminating these ethnic minorities, it assumes that it can bring about a different kind of political dispensation. And so the withdrawal of Eritrean forces, I think, will go a long way towards ending the current conflict, because at the moment, it's not just the Ethiopian government that's fighting Tigrayan forces. In fact, for all intents and purposes, the Eritrean regime is leading. It is the principal architect of the war at the moment. And so the withdrawal of Eritrean forces is not enough, but it is a necessary condition for the peaceful resolution of the current conflict.
He also blamed the Eritrean government for using starvation as a weapon of war, reminding UN OCHA's accusation of Eritrea's government for impeding about 130 of humanitarian operations in May of 2021 in Tigray.
Oftentimes when we talk about the use of starvation as a weapon of war in Tigray, people usually start since the end of June 2021, when the government of Tigray assumed its rightful position here in Mekelle. But it actually predates that. By the end of May 2021, the United Nations had documented about 130 incidents of humanitarian aid blockage, in which aid workers were harassed, intimidated, beaten, murdered, and turned back at checkpoints manned by the Eritrean and by the Ethiopian government militaries, as well as by Amhara forces. 50 of these 130 incidents were accounted for by the murderous Eritrean army. 50 other incidents were accounted for by the genocidal Ethiopian army. And 27 of these incidents were accounted for by an assortment of ragtag Amhara forces that were roaming freely across Tigray. All right? And so 130 incidents of humanitarian aid blockade. In fact, the Eritrean government's violation of international humanitarian law was so egregious that the then head of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Mark Lowcock, publicly singled out Eritrea for using starvation as a weapon of war against the people of Tigray. Unfortunately, the international community did not heed his calls and mete out appropriate punishment against the Eritrean government.
Speaking about the way out to the crisis, Dr. Molla says the international community should call what happens in Tigray by its proper name, genocide.
The international community has access to a robust package of policy tools that could incentivize the Abiy government and the Eritrean governments to withdraw from Tigrayan territories and to press the Abiy regime to allow unimpeded humanitarian access to Tigray. But the international community, if it cannot call out, for example, what's happening in Tigray by its proper name, that is aggression, invasion, genocidal assault, then it can't prescribe appropriate policy solutions to bring the problem to an end. So,
despite multiple statements of concern by the international community, Ethiopian and Eritrean forces continue their military operations in Tigray, including the indiscriminate aerial attacks that have left countless civilians dead and public and private properties destroyed.